Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar with ControlUp. Got a lot of great stuff we're going to get into today, but before we dive into the introductions and to the content, just want to make you aware of some of the events that we have coming up today, and it's actually kind of already almost done, is New York Metro's meeting, but tomorrow, if you want to catch ControlUp again, they will be at the Indianapolis meeting, which is virtual, of course, and I know we have a lot of meetings on the calendar, but they'll also be at the Northern Indiana meeting later. And then also just point out some of the events that we have coming up. Northeast Excel, ControlUp will be there. That's our next afternoon-long technical event. We've got 3 great sessions. It's an awesome afternoon of content. It's all free. It's perfect for you guys. And also next week, we have another automation-themed webinar. We've been doing a lot of those lately, so be sure to catch that. Pat Patterson is with Citrix. He's been doing lots of hands-on. It's really great, just like straight technical information. If you guys are into automation, check it out. All right, we are going to be talking about how to solve Citrix problems with ControlUp today. And I don't know, does Citrix have problems? I don't know. How do you know where they're coming from? We're going to find that out. But first, let me go over a couple details. We are recording today's presentation, so if you need to drop out and pick it back up, that's fine. We'll send you a link to the recording tomorrow. That's going to come to you in an email from GoToWebinar, so be on the lookout for that. We also want you to type your questions in as you have them. We'll try to get to them as we can. We'll get to some during the presentation and some afterwards, but type them in as you have them and we'll do our best. And finally, I have a short survey for you at the end. I'll drop the link in the chat later on. It's anonymous and just for our use only. We'd just like to get your feedback. All right, so who's with us today? We have presenting from ControlUp, we have Trentent Tye. He's a senior Citrix technical expert and a CTP. Hello, Trenton.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thank you. And we also have Katie Hans with us. She's with ControlUp. She's kind of backstage with me. We're going to be keeping an eye on all the Q&A today. Hi, Katie.
Hello. Yes, we're very excited to be here.
And then keeping an eye on all of those really awesome questions that you're going to be asking throughout is Jonathan Rullen. He is a CTA, which is a Citrix Technology Advocate. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for everyone joining.
Awesome. All right. So Trenton, I am going to disappear and come back at the end, and I'm going to hand you the screen, sending it to you. There you go.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining this webinar put on by Citrix and ControlUp. So topic for today is solve Citrix problems with ControlUp, and we'll go over lots of different scenarios that we have within ControlUp, some of our features that we offer, and show you what we can offer you in your environments. So to start, I'm just going to do a little bit about what ControlUp is, and for anyone who's not familiar with us. So we have offices in the US, in Europe, and in Israel. We have, I think it's over 1,300 customers today, so this slide's a bit dated. We're Citrix, VMware, and Nutanix ready. So we support all the major UC platforms, including the underlying hypervisor technologies and so on and so forth. And we're a Microsoft WVD partner. So if you're, as a part of your cloud journey, if you're using WVD to stand up the Windows 10 multi-session and using Citrix Cloud on there, we can certainly help you there in that regard. So a little bit about what we do. You can kind of see from the text here that we encompass a lot of different things in our monitoring and management solutions. So from synthetic logons and availability testing with Scalpies to automation and leveraging the expert community and remediation with the ControlUp real-time product, and then going into the troubleshooting, root cause analysis, sizing, recommendations, trending, and forecasting with the ControlUp Insights product for the historical monitoring piece. We offer all of that and more. So if you have any questions about how ControlUp is actually architected, this is how it looks. So what we have in the bottom left corner is we have the ControlUp console, and this is a C# application you run on your premises, on your desktop, or on your Citrix servers that you can publish out, and that connects into all the various agents that we have installed on your devices. Or we can connect in agentlessly to the Citrix environments. So we support Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So we support the CVAD on premises, and we support Citrix Cloud now, which is new, or was new, I think back in November. We just released the Citrix Cloud integration, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And then from there, we actually have the ControlUp monitor cluster. So the console is showing you the stats in real time, and you can take remediation action from it. We also have the monitor cluster, which is the headless operation. So that's the 24/7 monitoring. So ControlUp, you stand up some of these monitors in your environment, and they'll just keep in top of all the resources that you have and all their metrics and whether or not it needs to take some kind of action against them. And then all the data from the ControlUp monitor is uploaded to ControlUp Insights for the historical monitoring. And then we also have a channel that's open to our ControlUp Solve application, which is our new web-based ControlUp console. So this is available to be accessed from anywhere in the world, and you can see the real-time metrics and stats of your environment as it exists at that point in time. So that's pretty cool. So as with everything we're famous for, I'm going to dive straight into the demo so you guys can see the product, get an idea for how it works and what some of its capabilities are. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and Jonathan will just interrupt me and I'll answer them for you. So the first thing we're going to show is the real-time troubleshooting aspect of ControlUp. So this includes the performance monitoring, what these metrics and stats look like, how we can use ControlUp to monitor and optimize your environment, and then we'll go into the ControlUp automation engine and how that operates. So I'm just going to switch over now. All right, and so I'm going to just switch on over to the ControlUp Management Console. So this is our ControlUp Management Console. This is the C# app that I was talking about. And so what's really cool about this application is it's a portable app. So you can download it off of our website. No sales call is needed. No, defining like a 2 or 3 hour or 4 hour time slice of your day or of your week in order to set this up is required. You can just download it straight from the ControlUp website and then double click it and start playing with it if you wanted to. The first thing we recommend is you add your hypervisors into ControlUp. So when it launches up, you can just right click on this, hit add your hypervisor, select your different type of hypervisor that you want to connect into. So obviously we support all the major players again. We support VMware with ESXi, Citrix with Citrix Hypervisor, Microsoft with Hyper-V, and Nutanix with AHV. You add that into your environment and then it gets populated up here. And so I think most of us are probably running VMware in your environment, and so I'll just kind of focus on that. But if you're running Citrix Hypervisor, we absolutely support that as well. So what I'm going to look at here is I'm just going to focus on our HQ data center. And here I'm going to focus on the hosts that we have. So we've got this middle pane here. This is our real-time grid view display. So this is where you can take all your management actions on and you can see all the metrics being updated in real time. Above it is our different bars that you can choose to select if you want to look at the different statistics or the different types of metrics that you get for the different objects. So I'm looking at the hosts right now, having focused on the data cluster, the data center, sorry. And you can see we've got our 3 VMware hosts here, and you can see all the different metrics that ControlUp is pulling into it. So we pull like almost anything, almost everything. And specifically what I can see here immediately is that I've got one host that is in some level of stress. So VM host 2 here, he's telling me that he's at a medium stress level. And if I click these 3 little dots, it's going to tell me why. So it's telling me that the data store rewrite IOPS is adding a load of 2 to the stress level column. And if I continue to mouse over, I can see here's the data store rewrite IOPS and it's bright red. So it's sticking out like a sore thumb, super easy to see and super easy to identify that this particular column is having some kind of health issue. And so now the question is, what is going on with this host? Is there a way we can identify what was causing this issue? So before we just get into that, I just want to show that if we right click on these objects, we actually get a contextual menu that brings us up a series of actions we can do. So we can execute a script action on this particular host, or we can execute a built-in native action. So in this particular native action, I can set this host to be in maintenance mode. So if I think that the problem is isolated to this host, I can enable maintenance mode and we can consider the problem solved or the problem remediated until we start doing some root cause and finding out what's going on. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at this metric here, the data store read write IOPS, and he's got the three little menu icon here. And if I click on it, it's going to bring up our virtual expert, which is going to suggest to us how we can troubleshoot this issue. And so it's suggesting to us three different ways we could do this. We can navigate to the machines view and look at the machines on this hypervisor and see what kind of metrics they have. I can navigate to the sessions view. So any user sessions that are on any of these virtual machines, we can go there and ControlUp will automatically sort it for us so that we can see which session might be causing that problem, or we can go to the processes view where it's going to show us the same thing. So I'm going to step through each one of these. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the machines view. And here we see ControlUp has now highlighted the particular column of interest that it thinks is having the health issue. It's telling us what we're investigating. So at the time that we clicked it, it said data store read write IOPS was at 38,773. And we can see underneath, now that we've navigated to the machines view, it's telling us this particular virtual machine is the one that is having this IOPS issue. And so what we could do here is we can actually take a management action on it. So we can right click on this, and now we can see the contextual menu is actually quite a bit more expanded. There's quite a few things we can do here. And the reason why this menu is expanded and it's got significantly more actions we can do is because we have an agent installed on these virtual machines. And so by utilizing the agent and communicating to it, we can execute some of these actions. So for instance, we can look at the recommended actions, which are a series of script-based actions that are being applied to that machine and recommended for you based on some of the metrics that are available. We can RDP to the machine. So if you wanted to actually get into the machine, get your hands in there and take a look at what's going on, you can do that through ControlUp, and that'll take you to the ControlUp remote desktop manager. So we can just take a quick look at that. So boom, now I'm connected into the machine, just like that. Super easy, super quick. One neat little feature of the remote desktop manager as well is that it's organized in the same logical tree that you have on your organization pane on the left here. And one thing that's really cool is that you can define the different properties of your connections. So for this one, for this particular folder, I can define that I don't want to inherit it from the parent, and I can choose to use my credentials for any machine that is within that folder. So pretty cool if you want to do that. And then anything else if you want to define any of the standard RDP type properties in there. So pretty cool. So we're looking at this machine here. He still has his health issue. The RDP is one remediation action. We could also look at the file system of that machine, or we could look at the file system of multiple machines. Same with the programs or registry if we think that it's a problem that's across multiple devices. We can also execute some other management actions that are based on the machine level. So again, we can refresh machine group policy. We can enable or disable process execution. So if we find it's a particular process that's causing this issue, we can disable that process from actually executing. So if you have, some users that are, downloading Chrome on the side when they should be using Microsoft Edge or vice versa, we could actually disable Chrome from running on the machines. We can import a registry file into the machine registry hive. We can execute some kind of power management action. So if I think rebooting this machine is going to solve this issue, I can certainly do that from here. And this is using the native Microsoft shutdown.exe essentially to execute these reboot and shutdown commands. If you have a virtual machine that maybe is frozen, like it's blue screened on boot or something like that, you might need to step up and use the host level power management, which is what we offer through this tool as well. So we can connect in, if we have the hypervisor connected, we could force power off the machine, we can force reset it, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, we can send messages to every user on the machine, whether that's through the msg.exe utility or through ControlUp's own send super message, which has some pretty crazy cool capabilities as well. So if I were to select that, you can see the send super message. We can specify a message title. We can define the message itself. There's obviously some rich text capabilities, including adding images. We could even make it a poll, so we could have people ask and answer questions. So if you were doing like an application upgrade or something like that, and you needed the users to log off, you can ask them, you know, you're going to be logged off in 5 minutes. Is this acceptable, or so on and so forth, and they can respond yes or no. Okay, just canceled that operation. And then lastly, we offer an incredibly powerful way of extending the ControlUp product, and that's through script actions. So script actions is a way that we can enhance ControlUp in almost infinite number of ways. So script actions, I think have like 400 odd script actions available in our community today. And so you can see we just offer just tons and tons of stuff. And each one of these script actions can be used with automation that I'll go into later. So that's the machine actions, but obviously rebooting the machine might solve the problem, but I haven't root caused it. We still don't know what's causing this load. So if I click on the menu icon again, I'm going to navigate now into the sessions view. And now ControlUp will change what we're looking at up top, and it'll show me all the sessions on this particular virtual machine. So we can see we're investigating the virtual disk rewrite IOPS at 19,000 IOPS on this particular machine. And we can see all the sessions underneath. So we can see there's 3 sessions on these machines. And it looks like there's one particular session that's causing our IO read issue. And again, ControlUp has highlighted that column of interest that we're investigating. So we know very quickly that relationship from the host level to the machine level, now to the session level. So what remediation action can we take with these sessions? So if I right click on this guy, you can see that the contextual menu has changed, and that's because the object that we are trying to execute a management action on has changed. It was a machine action, now it's a session action. So we can see here, we can actually chat with the user. We can initiate a chat and ask them, you know, what are you doing? What's going on? We can look at the performance and ControlUp insights. We can manage any programs or updates that are installed on this per user session, manage the per user registry. We can ask to initiate remote assistance if required. We can even use the ControlUp product to get a session screenshot if we want to see what the user is doing. So you'll notice that all of these are lit up, which means that they're selectable and clickable for my demo here. But if you're a security conscious organization, every one of these menu options in ControlUp is able to be controlled through our security policy. So if I was to disable, say, getting the screenshot without notifying the user, say you're in a security conscious environment like finance or healthcare, and you do not want your IT administrators to be able to take screenshots of just anyone's session, we can disable any or all of these options. So that way that's not possible. As well, we can kill the user's group policy, we can reapply the group policy, and we can refresh the user group policy. And there's a really cool thing that you can do with ControlUp that's really powerful here, is that typically one of the group policy settings that you enable, especially for standard users or users you want to lock down, is like disabling the command prompt. I think we're all pretty familiar with that prompt dialog that tells you that the command prompt has been disabled by your administrator. Well, one of the things you can do in ControlUp is if you have a session that you're troubleshooting, maybe there's an application that's being published with AppV or the new MSIX format, and you want to try like maybe launching Procmon in that virtual bubble so that way you can see what it sees. But since you can't launch the command prompt, you're stuck. What we can do here is we can kill the group policy, which will remove it from that user's registry hive, and it'll refresh Explorer or the application that it's running. And then you can actually go down to the processes option here, and you could start a process in that session. So if they get that prompt, user can't launch the command prompt, close that dialog, we kill group policy, we go here and we start cmd.exe in their session, we finish our troubleshooting, and then when you're all done, you just go back and you just reapply group policy. And it'll take those registry keys that had moved out and reapply them back in. Very cool, very powerful feature, all done within ControlUp. And then obviously you can monitor the user session while you're doing that to walk them through whatever troubleshooting steps you have. So very cool. And then lastly, we can import per user registry into those particular hives and execute some remote desktop services action. So this is obviously using the logoff command, disconnect the user, the send super message, which we saw before, and the send message. And then lastly, again, script actions, we can extend out ControlUp in almost an infinite number of ways against session objects. So obviously we can get user GPOs, we can use the very famous analyze logon duration, which has been written and updated by Guy Leach and myself and others to encompass tons of different technologies within the analyze logon duration and trying to figure out logons and how long different things took. So you can see we offer just, again, hundreds and hundreds of scripts and extensibility within ControlUp for what you can do for sessions. So again, but we're not quite finished troubleshooting yet. We still don't know what's generating these read-write IOPS. We know it's this particular user session, but we might want to go into this further and actually see, is there a way we can dig down even further and find out what's going on? So again, clicking on this option, on the menu option, we can now navigate to the processes view. And this is going to drill us into that session and show us all the processes related to that session. And now we're at the lowest level we can go. We can see immediately that dynamo.exe is the one that's generating all of our load. And so now that we're in the processes view, I can right click on this process and we get the processes management actions. So now we can do a whole bunch of different things. Again, we can do script actions that have been published out against processes. So boom, we can see all of those that are available. We can send a message to the user for the process itself. We can execute a management action, whether that's ending the process, killing the process. We can change process affinity. So if we don't want it to run on all of the various processors that might be on there. So if you, are using a shared desktop where you've got, 20 or 30 or 50 users on them, and someone decided to run a report generator, which was supposed to be run after hours, but say they ran it during the beginning of the day, and it's sucking up CPU and IO like crazy, you can actually define it to only run on particular processors. Or we could even do something like we can set the process priority to be below normal or idle, so that way it's not impacting users who are requiring CPU. Or we can do this really cool feature within ControlUp where we can actually start throttling the process. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to limit it to only use about 4% of the CPU. So once I hit OK here, we'll get a little bang telling us that this process has been modified, and we'll see the CPU utilization drop. Boom, just like that. So now we're freeing up those CPU resources for other users on that box while still allowing the application to operate. So pretty cool way of remediating it without preventing users from being productive, both for users who require more additional resources and for that particular process itself. And then to remove that, we can just stop CPU throttling on that particular process, and then boom, it shoots right back up. So this is how ControlUp can actually, in real time, manage all of the resources in your environment. And what's really cool, one of the things that I should point out is you saw I took an action here, and within ControlUp, because it's a real-time product, you saw that CPU drop like immediately within 3 seconds. Where, if you, some of a lot of the other products that are out there, they generally have like a cadence that's more on like the minute scale. So if you've got like SCOM, or if you're using something like that, you might be experiencing 5 or 10 minutes between when you execute an action and when you can actually see that result. Well, obviously that doesn't really help you understand cause and effect, right? Because 5 minutes is a long time, or 10 minutes is a long time, where something else might have occurred during that time to change the properties of what you saw. But within ControlUp, because it's real time, executing an action, you actually see that occur in real time. Very cool. Helps understand that relationship between what you do and the objects within the ControlUp product.
So Trent, there are some questions coming in. I just wanted to see if we can get to those, just 2 of them right now. Someone was asking, what if you use WEM to control some of these settings instead of group policies?
Yeah, so obviously we're only impacting group policy. We don't change any of the WEM settings, but if you're using WEM to control things like registry keys and so on and so forth, usually those are applied on user logon with WEM. And so we actually do offer the ability to actually manage things like registries and files. So here we can see I've got 3 different users here. I'm using what's called the controllers feature within ControlUp, and I can actually navigate in here and see what the different user properties are for the registry. So if we were applying, WEM to a particular session, we could, like for, say there's a software registry key you want to apply for certain users, their admins versus like regular users, we could go in ControlUp and we can actually see the differences between the different user accounts. And then here we can actually take some management actions as well. So we can create keys, delete keys across all of these different users. So that's kind of how ControlUp and WEM will kind of play together. WEM applied to that logon, and then ControlUp can then modify it after the fact if required for whatever troubleshooting purposes you have. And what was the second question?
The second question is kind of just a general technology question, is shadow versus remote assistance. How do you guys handle it differently?
Yeah, so the shadow feature within ControlUp here, this feature actually is only for XenApp 6.5. It requires an update, and part of the challenge there is that Microsoft changed how shadowing worked between like Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 2012, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of a legacy feature at this point. Remote assistance is what Microsoft recommended in the Windows XP, Windows 2008 R2 days. And then they, again, like I said, they changed the shadowing feature on future ones. So what we do for shadowing, if you don't want to use the native ControlUp tool because you want mouse and keyboard control, is we actually offer an SBA to shadow the session. And this will actually use the native mstsc.exe, and this can connect into any protocol. So it can connect into HDX, it can connect into RDP, it can connect into anything. So we're recommending that you use our script action for now until we port it back into the actual built-in native shadow action. So the big difference there is obviously mouse and keyboard support. It's much easier to do that through shadowing than through remote assistance, but remote assistance is another way that you can, again, shadow a session if required. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, so continuing on. So we just finished looking at how we can actually troubleshoot that particular issue, so that's great. Let's move back into the slides. And so we want to get into monitoring and optimizing and the ControlUp automation engine. So these two kind of go hand in hand. ControlUp is actually, it's reading performance counters, it's reading different metadata in your various sessions. And one of the really cool things about ControlUp is that because it's reading performance counters and showing them to you in a sane way without having to go through that perfmon utility, you can actually, again, see cause and effect of how things are in your environment. And one of the most coolest performance counters that I think are out there is one called user input delay. And it was introduced in Windows Server 2019 or Windows 10 1809. So it's available in both those operating systems and up. And what it is, it actually measures the user interface of the application you're using. So as you see my mouse hovering over these different menus, and as these menus actually change their selection state, user input delay will measure that change. So as I move from user to machine, that how long it took the change from when the mouse was on one button to the other, one field to the other, it tells me how long that took in 16 millisecond increments. So for instance, I'm looking at my session here, and if I find my user input delay, we can see I'm at 16 milliseconds here. So as I hover over these buttons, that's just how long my user input delay is. So that's a really cool thing to know. And the reason why that's really cool to know is there's generally that question, is it the application on the Citrix server that's slow, or is it the network connection of the user connecting into the application? Well, if the application freezes, you generally don't know, is it the application on the Citrix server or is it the network, unless you're using these metrics. So by using user input delay and seeing that the response time is fast, like 16 milliseconds is very fast, then we can say with quite a bit of certainty that if the UI is responding in a reasonable amount of time, that it would be the network that's causing your slowness. And then the vice versa is also true. If we saw that the latency of our connection was like 100 milliseconds, like I'm seeing here, but my user input delay was at 1,000 milliseconds or 4,000 milliseconds or something insane like that, then we can easily assume that the problem exists with the application on the Citrix server itself. Whether it's waiting for data, whether it's waiting for CPU, whether it's waiting for disk, we can more easily identify, is it the network or is it the Citrix server? So that's a really cool feature that we offer. And then above and beyond that, what we can do with these columns is we can tie them to automation. So we see how user input delay works. And what we can do is we can create a trigger to do an action to try to boost up the resource consumption of those individual processes, so that way they can try to get their work done quicker if we started seeing something like that. So for instance, I've got a trigger already created here that will increase CPU priority when it detects that user input delay has exceeded some threshold. So we can see I'm looking for a record type of process. And for this particular trigger, we're looking for two pieces of data from the columns. So we're looking for the process name, and for this particular one, we're looking at it to be Adobe Reader 32 or Acro Reader 32. And we're looking for the user input delay to be greater than or equal to 15 milliseconds. Now, in your particular environment, you'll probably want this value to be higher, but for our demos, this is what we use. So again, you can change any of the values here. So you can set it for 100 milliseconds, or you can set it for 300 milliseconds, or 1,000 milliseconds, or whatever you want. And you can specify process names that you want to check it on. So if you don't want it to run against your whole environment, because opening up an Excel doc might lock that UI for a couple seconds, and you don't want Excel to get its process priority bumped up, you can specify different processes that you want to target. And so then once that happens, and the process is in that state for at least 3 seconds, so if user input delay was 1,000 milliseconds, it needs to be in 1,000 milliseconds for over a 3-second time period, and that's to stop flapping from happening. You choose the scope, so you choose which, on your folder structure here on the left, which devices you want this to target. So for my particular one, I'm going to target all my Citrix devices. And then here we can run an action. So this one's actually set process priority to above normal. And we can see that trigger here. And so what that'll do is that'll just pass in, that'll run a script action on that particular resource, on that particular object that hits those properties. So let's look at what that script action looks like. So if I go in here and I go to my organizational scripts, and I'm just going to search to above normal, set process priority to above normal. And so this is what my script action looks like. So these are the settings that I'm running. I've assigned it to a process. I've set my execution context to target machine, which means that it's going to run under the local system account. So this is going to run with the highest level of privileges that you can offer for this particular script. And obviously you can change that execution context so it only executes on a user session level, and then have all the restrictions associated with that. You can run it on the ControlUp console, which means anywhere you're running the ControlUp console, that's where the script's going to execute. So for automation, it cannot be the ControlUp console. And then the last thing we can have is we can choose these script actions to actually execute on another machine. So this is useful for things like if you want to run automation against the various objects in your environment, but you need to install things like the Citrix PowerShell modules. So if you don't have the PowerShell modules everywhere, you could define one particular machine that has them, like a service machine or a jump machine or something like that, and actually have these scripts execute there instead. And then you can even define, like, let's say if we ran it on a different machine, we could define which credentials we want it to run as. So we could define a service account that could connect into Citrix and then execute whatever action is required. So we're going to set this back to target machine and just leave it at local system. And then here's the script. So you can see the script is like incredibly simple. You'll have to, bear with me that it's a PowerShell script that has 2 lines of code. It technically could have 1 if I were to just define this hash as the numerical value instead, but I wanted to just kind of show that we could define this as something else. So I'm setting this as 1, which ends up being the below normal value, because that's from 0 is how you start counting arrays. So 1 is the second item in the list, which for us happens to be below normal. And you can see here we're actually getting an argument to pass to the script. So this is looking for the process ID, and we define that here in the arguments tab. So here you can see arg0 process ID, and we can actually preview what that value will look like. So we can test our script. We can test our script by getting these values, then executing it manually. So we can see arg's value for that particular one was 3140. So if we wanted to test it now, we can just run the script manually on that machine with those parameters. So you can see how ControlUp with its trigger mechanism can actually have the logic within the trigger itself, reducing the complexity of the scripts that you have. We didn't need to, in that script, check to see if the process was, above normal already. We could actually do that within the trigger. We didn't need to check for the process name. Again, that's done in the trigger. We didn't need to check what the user input delay value was. Again, that's all done in the trigger for us automatically. So very cool. So that's how we can use ControlUp to optimize the resources within your environment. And that particular one, that's how we can help optimize the processes that you're running. So if you're, healthcare and you have like the Epic application, you might want to enable something like that to just boost up so that way it gets those extra CPU cycles, because that would be considered the critical app in your environment. All right, And then, so we went through that. We went through the ControlUp automation engine. So that's great. So let's go to the next one. So ControlUp and Citrix. So ControlUp was originally developed essentially as a Citrix monitoring product. So from the get-go, we've been ground floor with Citrix and Citrix capabilities on managing and monitoring your environments. So let's go over some of the integrations we offer, some of the capabilities that ControlUp has built in, and then we'll talk about some of the superpowers we have with ControlUp. So right off the hop, I want to just go over here and just focus on our EUC environments. So within ControlUp, we have this feature called EUC Environments, which allows us to agentlessly connect in to the different Citrix environments you have. So if you have a test environment, a prod environment, and both of those are CVAD on premises, we can connect into them. We call those the Citrix Sites. And so once you connect into them, we enumerate everything within the Citrix environment that you have, including the brokers and delivery groups, and we start pulling different metadata pieces of information down so that way we can actually monitor the environment completely. So what we're looking at with the Citrix site here is we can see, we're monitoring delivery groups. We can actually see the percentage of delivery groups available. We can see the logon duration averages as reported by the Citrix metrics, which are different than the Windows metrics, because the start and end timers are different for Citrix versus other versus Microsoft and other environments that might be out there. You can see classical stuff like the average sessions per machine, the number of available machines, machines in use, disconnected machines, machines that are healthy or not healthy, and so on and so forth. And what's really cool is that within ControlUp, we can actually manage these objects. Let me focus back on here and we'll drill down into the sites. Okay, actually, I'm going to focus on the brokers first. Let's look at what the brokers offers us. So again, if we focus on the brokers, we can see that the brokers is offering us whether or not the environment is healthy or not. And we can actually set triggers on all of this. So if we created a trigger saying CVAD percentage healthy brokers was less than 100%, we can get alerted that has happened. And so then you can start taking action, or we can attach it to a script and actually remediate that. So if I drill into this, we can see the status of our individual brokers themselves. We can see all the different services as they're reported, whether they're okay or not. We can see, is everything connected, license period, license utilization, last time it was started, so on and so forth, all that cool metrics. And each one of these can be configured on a trigger itself. So one particular scenario that I'd been alerted to maybe 2 years ago now was a customer was having an issue with the Citrix site database where it was flapping on the brokers. That means it was becoming disconnected. And they had no idea why. So what we did is we attached 3 different triggers or 3 different script actions to this one particular trigger. So we would look for the site database to go down. And once it went down, or once it came back as disconnected, ControlUp would execute 3 actions. One, it would ping the database server to make sure that there was network connectivity between them. The other is it would run a script action on the broker itself for it to query the status of the database. So there's a commandlet module or command within the ControlUp PowerShell modules that tells you the status of the database itself. And then I think the third one was just a simple database test to query the SQL to make sure that it was functional and operational. And so what we could do with all of those tests is that helps us augment our troubleshooting capabilities. So that way we can determine, okay, was network connectivity there, right? If ping went down, we could say very obviously and very quickly that, hey, there's something wrong with the network. If ping's not making it through, network traffic's not making it through, and so on and so forth. So that's one way we can help augment our troubleshooting capabilities. So if I take a step back here and just go back to the delivery groups now. So for each one of these delivery groups, you can see all the different metrics that we have before, but we can actually take an action on these delivery groups. So we can right click on this, and through our native built-in tools, we can do some kind of management activity. So if you were migrating from, say, on-premises to the cloud, you could do that all completely within ControlUp, and then when you're ready for the cutover, it's just as simple as right-clicking on this, disable delivery group on one end, right-click on the other one, and enable delivery group or maintenance mode or whatever you want in order to do that cutover. So boom, just like that, super simple, super easy. You don't have to have different management consoles open. It's just trivial stuff to do, super awesome. And then within these delivery groups, if I drill down into them, we can now see the machines underneath them. And again, here we can actually right click on each of these machines and we can do a management action on these machines. So I can enable maintenance mode for each one of these machines, or I can select multiple machines and actually execute a maintenance mode across all of them, and so on and so forth. So again, really cool, really powerful, really fast how ControlUp has these capabilities and actions all built into the product itself. So that's for on-premises Citrix. But if we have Citrix Cloud, well, we certainly connect into that as well. And so let me focus on this guy. And here's what we can see within the Citrix Cloud, the data that we're pulling from Citrix Cloud. So I'm going to focus on the folders again. And here we've got our different folders. We've got the delivery groups we can look at. We have 2 delivery groups here. We've got the Cloud Connectors folder. We can actually look at Cloud Connector specific stats. So if I double click in here and drill into it, we can see all the different cloud connectors within our ControlUp cloud environment. And so we can see the cloud connector status, whether it's connected, disconnected. We can see whether it requires an update or has been updated, so it's got the proper version of it. We can look at all the usual stats that you get from ControlUp, as long as the ControlUp agent is installed and there's network connectivity between your console and those Citrix Cloud connectors. You can see the metadata stats that we're offering for Citrix Cloud as well. So we can look at Cloud Connector version, the expected version. So when we query Citrix Cloud, it'll actually tell us what the Cloud Connector version is available for deployment to those machines, and then what version actually resides on those machines. So we're pulling that information out for ControlUp. So this can help you, since Citrix rolls out the Cloud Connector updates, you can actually monitor those updates as they occur in your environment. It's pretty cool there. And then as well, if we look at the delivery groups, so I'm just going to hop back here. Let's just refocus on the delivery groups. And so again, within the delivery groups here, we can actually take an action on these Citrix Cloud delivery groups. So again, we tie into the same management actions that we do with the CVAD on premises. So you get the same user experience between Citrix Cloud and Citrix on premises, and we can execute all the same management actions that we have within here. So again, if I drill within this guy, we can see all the Citrix Cloud related metrics. So whether or not it's registered, it's powered on, what state it's in, what resource location it is, the VDA version, and so on and so forth. So if you're rolling out, new versions of the VDA, and you're doing that staggered approach to it, you can actually group the different VDA versions, and you can actually see what they are within ControlUp in real time. And we'll take a quick look at that in a minute, because I only have one object here, so grouping wouldn't be that exciting. But again, we can right click on this particular object and we can do some kind of management action like enable maintenance mode without having to go into Citrix Cloud and navigating through that UI for that. So very quick, very fast, single pane of glass, so to speak, that offers that capabilities. All right, so now I'm just going to continue on. And we looked at automations, we looked at resource automation, we looked at augmented troubleshooting. I'll get into automatic remediation really quick, and then we'll hop into some of the new exciting features that we're offering here. So for automatic remediation, what we can do within ControlUp is, based on the columns that we have here, we can detect states. We can detect when objects are in particular states. So for instance, we have one, this is a community trigger here that you can enable in your environment just by clicking this little checkbox. But what this trigger offers is it offers to look at each one of the machines in your environment and determine whether or not it's functional. So if the if the Citrix registration state is unregistered, but it's not in maintenance mode, it doesn't have any user sessions on it, and if it's powered on, I think we can safely assume with all of these properties that this machine is broken, because it should not be unregistered. So if all of these properties are true, and it's been in the state for at least 5 minutes, so that means the machine has been booted up, we're giving it 5 minutes to finish its registration. And if it hasn't completed it because it's unregistered, but these other properties are true, we can then execute an action. So in this particular one, we've tied it with an action to just do a simple graceful restart. So this will execute just a shutdown -R and just let the machine reboot and see if it comes back up successfully. If you wanted to, you could as well run a different action. So this one is set for 5 minutes, but we could set it for 10 or 15 or 20 if you wanted to escalate the level of severity of remediation action. So in this particular one, what we could do is, I think on here, yes, we've got restart VM. So I can actually restart the VM with the hypervisor. So this could forcibly reboot it for us in case it was like blue screen or in a state like that where it didn't come up healthy. We've got our 5-minute check where it tries to reboot it gracefully. We'll duplicate that trigger and create a new one. So we've got the duplicate here, and we'll define it to restart the VM after 10 minutes this time. So we're essentially escalating our level of remediation severity to resolve this issue automatically. And if you're someone like me who used to work in healthcare and used to do those 5 a.m. checks to make sure all the machines were working before the user rush at 7 a.m. or so, this would have been a lifesaver for me back then, because then I could have slept in. I didn't need to get up at 5. I could have just got an alert, an email alert or a text notification or something like that to notify me that my machines weren't coming up, and then I could have woken up and actually resolved the issue, as opposed to doing these laborious health checks to make sure everything is functional. ControlUp could do that for us just based on the states of the objects. Okay, so that's automatic remediation, and we did, as I said, augmented troubleshooting and resource optimization. So let's get into proactive monitoring. So this is a really powerful feature that ControlUp is offering, and it's called Scoutbees. It's written by, or it's been developed by the great Gotti Feldman within our organization. And what Scoutbees allows us to do is it allows us to test all the different resources within your environment. So we can test for application availability. We can test for desktop availability. We can test for some network tests to try out, to make sure that our devices are available from a network perspective. So we can do ping tests. We can do trace routes. I think we can do DNS lookup tests to make sure that DNS is functional, which is especially important if you're, say, migrating portals from one to the other. You want to make sure that both are functional. We can actually do those sort of tests. So what we're looking at here, I'm going to switch to the EUC. So you can see we support all different types of scouts. We call the EUC scouts. These are the ones that test your application and desktops. And then we have the network scouts that do what I mentioned just before. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at one particular application that has an uptime of 70.8%. So this is an internal app that we're using within ControlUp here, the DICOM viewer. And if I want to see the results of that test, I can actually click on the test itself. So it's hyperlinked here. And this brings us in to show us what the test was and the failures it had and the successes it's had. So in this particular one, this is over the last 24 hours, but we can define, whatever date range you want. So if you want to review tests in the past to see if like this particular network change causes an outage. If we know the start time and end time and we see that it was just like this, where it started at this time and ended at this time, we can probably say that that network change caused our issue. But let's look at all the tests and see what kind of data we get from them. So let's look at a successful test to begin with. So we've got one test here. We can see the session ready took 24.552 milliseconds. And what we do, if we click on this, this brings up the results of that test. So ControlUp, when it logs into these resources, it'll actually take a picture of them. So you can actually see what the test saw. So if you connected in and you got that little dialogue telling you that Citrix didn't launch correctly, well, that wouldn't be a successful test, but it did connect in and show you the resource. Well, Scoutbees will be able to identify that for you, so you can go back in your test and find out when that occurred. Here you can actually see how long each one of the stages took of the test. So connecting into your environment, authenticating, how long that took, enumerating your applications, how long that took, downloading the ICA file, connecting into the actual Windows session, and actually starting the session, and then when the session is ready, when the application has come up, it measures all of those times. So now you can actually get a pretty accurate measurement of how long things take in your environment, and you can look at that over time. Where this is important is if you're in an environment that has like that flood of users that come in the morning, and if you're testing 24/7, you could actually see your session ready might be like 14 seconds, 14 seconds, 14 seconds. Then as load starts to increase, you'll start seeing those session ready times getting up to like 24, 25 seconds. And you know that that's the impact of the load on your servers. So your best case scenario could be 14 milliseconds if you were highly optimized with low user load. But as you increase user load, you can see that degradation and actually have that measured for you. So you can also see some tertiary information underneath here. So what the ICRTT metrics were when it connected to the session, what it measured, logon duration, and so on and so forth. So pretty cool. If we look for failures, this is what the failures look like. So selecting this particular one, we can see for this particular one, it couldn't get the session ready. So it connected in, it authenticated, it enumerated the application, it downloaded the ICA file, it actually attempted to connect, and then it failed after that. So potentially what happened here is we might have had like an existing session on a broken server that Storefront was probably trying to reconnect us to. And so it failed to do that. And what probably needed to be done was either rebooting the server, or maybe the server was just having some kind of health issue. Maybe this application was only published out on one server and it was set to maintenance mode, and that's why we were having these issues. But again, pretty cool to get that information, and then you can review back why your machine might have been in that particular scenario. So last thing I want to show for Scalpies is the network test. So I've personally used this for my environment, and we can actually see that here to evaluate the performance of my objects within my home lab. So each one of these, the Canadian North office, so that happens to be me, where I'm running a custom scout to measure the performance of all the different resources that I have. So I've got 3 different hosts here, and it's testing each one of them just by doing a simple ping test to see how they're doing. And if I look, like, let's say over the last month, I think I had an issue over the last month. Yes, I sure did. We can see when my test started to have some faults. And so what ended up happening here is that I had done a network change. I had updated my switch firmware, and that caused my outage. So we can actually see when that occurred, and after the switch came back, that things got better. So pretty cool to be able to do that and actually see that occur. And then obviously when I upgraded the firmware on my switch, I was getting alerted by Scoutbees that, hey, network is down, can't connect to these hosts, so then I knew to go back and relook, and I found that my configuration just happened to be wiped. So I had to redo it, which took some period of time. And then obviously I'm looking at storage. So here I've got a little NAS device in my environment, and I'm just doing a simple HTTP check. So I'm connecting in, doing an HTTP check to see if my NAS is responding, and I can actually measure that response. And why this is really cool is I can actually see, as you kind of saw there, that my performance of my storage changes with time. So as my devices boot up in the morning, my response time increases. And so what this is telling me is that actually, this device is a Synology 1813, so it's approaching 10 years old. As I've increased load on it with the different devices I have in my environment connecting to it, it's actually struggling to keep up. So I think that's really cool and really interesting to see that the response time is increasing because the CPU is just not powerful enough on it anymore. So I should probably look at upgrading it. But I think that's pretty impressive that Scalpies can give you that kind of information. All right, so that's proactive monitoring. Highly recommend you try it out. It's free for, I think, 14 days if you sign up off of the Scalpies website. I don't even think there might be a free tier where you can have one scout that tests one resource an hour. So if you have a home lab like me, it might be worth even doing that as well. Let's get into historical analysis as well. So this is the new feature, or not new, this is what we're offering within ControlUp for historical purposes.
Hey, Trenton, so we've got we got about 5 minutes, and there are some questions. Do you want to go into this, or do you want to answer some questions? I'll leave that up to you.
Sure, I'll just fire through these last 2 things I want to show, and then we'll get into the questions.
Awesome.
Okay, so this is our ControlUp Insights product. You can launch it through the ControlUp product. Let me try that again. Didn't like that. All right, doesn't look like it's gonna like my authentication. Let me see if I can log in. All right, and what Insights offers us is it offers us the historical monitoring piece, and it does a little bit more than that. We can actually look over time. Actually, I'm just gonna skip this because it's gonna take too long to sign in. But what it can do is it tracks the consumption, the resource consumption of your machines. And so what it'll show you is the 95th percentile and 99th percentile of your resource consumption of the machines in your environment, and we can actually adjust the CPU and the memory. It'll make recommendations to adjust them either down or up based on the 95th percentile over the period of a month's worth of usage on your resources. So that's one particular report that's really cool. Another one is a Gantt chart of a user session showing the life cycle of a session and processes starting and stopping, and you can map that with the CPU or memory or resource utilization, which is really cool to see too. So last thing I want to show is ControlUp Solve. So this is our new product within ControlUp. So this is Solve. It's our web-based product that I alluded to before. So this is the high-level dashboard view. And we have two different charts today, but we'll be allowing custom charts in the future. So we can actually look at resource consumption. So this is perfect for like a NOC type view if you want to look at the resource consumption of your environment there, or you can look at the user experience metrics that we're pulling from Citrix. And again, this could be in a NOC type view where they can see that kind of stuff. And within ControlUp, you can see you're kind of looking at the same grid type view that we see with ControlUp Classic. And what I want to show just really quickly, so if I switch back to my presentation, I just had a super secret slide here, just to give you a sneak peek at a new feature we're offering called Remote DX. And so what this offers is that if I click on the user sessions here, we are going to be offering a way to actually measure the performance of your home network through ControlUp, through a Citrix virtual channel. So we're going to pull some metrics from the home network where your home users are working from, and we'll actually be able to show the performance of all those devices. So you can see we're going to support iGel and Linux. We're going to support Mac OS, and we support Windows, obviously. So some of the different things you can see. So if I sort on this, we can look at the different Wi-Fi signal strengths that we're pulling from that particular environment, the client NIC speed, whether or not there's client packet loss, and then some simple tests that we're doing through the virtual channel. So we're doing a Lan Latency Test to show how fast the network connectivity is between your device and your local access point, so your Wi-Fi access point, or your local gateway, I should say. And then we're also tracking internet latency and total session latency. And what that looks like is essentially this. So we can see the Wi-Fi signal strength, we can see the ping time to the local router. So just by looking at this data, we can say with a lot of certainty that the problem is either existing with the device itself or the Wi-Fi router, because 211 milliseconds for a local LAN latency is ridiculously high. So we can go back to that user, and instead of just throwing darts on the wall, telling them to upgrade their ISP, telling them to move closer to the router, we can actually measure that and actually give that information to the IT admin, so that way they can make a informed decision as to what troubleshooting steps should be taken next. Okay, so I think that's that. Let's go through some questions if we can, Jonathan.
Yeah, awesome. So one question they said is, what is the time sample that you guys have for your perfmon stats?
So we are pulling metrics every 3 seconds. Every 3 seconds for agent-based metrics.
Okay. Another question, we're just going to see if we can power through these. Version that the user input delay is available in?
So it's not a ControlUp limitation. ControlUp has supported it since I think version 7.4, which was 2 years ago. So it's a Windows limitation. It requires Windows 10 1809 plus or Server 2019 plus. So anything newer than that.
Okay. Is it possible to manage RDS environments in Azure?
Yes. So RDS environments in Azure are the same as any other machine object that are within ControlUp. So we actually have a Azure environment that we connect into, and we're hosting both WVD and Citrix Cloud on them. So we're actually able to manage both of those environments. They look just like normal machine objects within ControlUp.
Okay, awesome. And then for the remote session, remote desktop feature of doing like either shadow and stuff, you said something about service accounts being needed. Do you guys integrate with any type of password management solution for that?
ControlUp actually has its own built-in credential manager. And so we recommend you use our credential store for that. And the reason for that is that for every ControlUp user, you can create a service account in here and share that credential amongst the users of the ControlUp product. And so that prevents you from having to define it in every single console.
Okay.
There's also the ability to have local credentials if you need to enter your own credentials that you don't want to share, but we certainly do offer the ability to use service accounts and share them out.
Okay. Yeah, there are a couple questions of like how you guys compare to other vendors and solutions and stuff like that. I think that would probably be best handled by some white papers that you guys have. So,
Sure.
and then for the agents, if for CVAT on-prem, is it going to be requiring the agents to be installed on the VMs, or can that be handled on hosting?
Can that be handled on hosting?
So yeah, I mean, do you require the agent to be installed on the VM if it's an on-prem CVAT?
We don't require the agent to be installed, but you do lose a lot of metrics without it. So for instance, I've disconnected from this machine, which means I'm not getting agent metrics anymore. And so you can see what you're missing versus an agent being pushed to the machine. So we still are getting metrics from CVAT itself. So for instance, like the server load and the number of user sessions here, but we're missing everything else. So we try to aggregate as best as we can between agent lists and agent-based metrics, but you get a lot more functionality and a lot more data with agent-based metrics.
Okay. Well, we're 2 minutes over. Like I said, the other questions are primarily comparing you guys against other stuff. So if they, I guess, if they want to reach out to you guys and get more detailed information of comparisons, then that's we can do that.
Absolutely. Last thing I just want to share real quick, because I usually get these questions a lot because ControlUp is super good at this, but we also do an excellent job of analyzing logon durations. And so I've got one particular user here, and you can see the type of data that we're offering to help you optimize your logon durations. So we tie in with FSLogix, we tie in with Avanti, we can actually show some of the native Windows stuff. So printers can delay your logons, and we can show you how long printers took to connect in. And then as well, we can show you how long it took before the shell was ready and what was causing that delay. So for this particular issue, this particular user, the shell was being delayed by Apex package load time. And then for group policy, we actually show you each one of the group policy objects and how long the extension took to process, and then the group policy took to process. So here's an example of a user with a long group policy extension that was on the group policy drive maps, and we can actually see which group policy that ended up being. So pretty cool stuff. All right, so I think, as we said, we're approaching the end here. So highly recommend, ControlUp, I mentioned it before, it's a portable application. You can download it for free from ControlUp. You don't need to sign up for a sales call. You don't need to do anything except just download it, and it's a portable app. Double click it, run it, add your hypervisor, and then just start connecting in and seeing what data we offer. Super simple, super easy to set up. We highly recommend you give it a try. And for any CTAs or CTPs or anyone else that might be out there with those designations, we do offer Nfr licensing for you as well. So feel free to reach out to controlup.com and or feel free to reach out to ControlUp and we can actually get you a license for you to play within your home lab or a test environment you might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Trenton. I have
Thank you.
one last slide, everybody. I put a link in the chat, by the way, for the Cgc survey I mentioned to you guys earlier. It's, like I said, it's short and anonymous, and it's for our use only. We just like to get your feedback. And I think there's a question on there about webinar topics that you would like to hear about. So if there are, because we do a lot of user shares that are just unsponsored stuff. So if there's anything like that you're interested in, definitely let us know. Okay, so I know a lot of you might have opted in for a chance to win the $500 Amazon gift card. So I want to give everyone a fair shot at winning. So I'm going to pull the report as soon as I close down this webinar, and I'm going to use my Google number randomizer. I'm going to pick a winner at random and look out for an email from me, and I will announce the winner on Twitter. So good luck, everybody. And with
Good
that, I
luck.
just want to, thank you. Thank you, Trenton. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, Katie, for being backstage with me. Hope you all enjoyed it and learned something new. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Citrix.
Thank
All
you.
right. You guys have a great afternoon. We'll see you at the next CGC event. Bye.